Hi, and welcome to our MVU virtual event on managing U2 servers with token-based authentication. And again, my name is Mike Belmy, and you've probably seen this slide a few times already by now. Some resources to follow along with the demos. We've got the U2 certificate management tool. That's found within the U2 Common Clients, version 5.2.1 is the latest. That can be downloaded for free from our product availability matrix at the link you see below the DB Tools version 4.4.1 there. We have the secure UniRPCD that's found in the Unidata coming 8.2.2 release and Universe 12.1.2 coming release, and is actually in a late 8.2.1 Unidata hotfix as well. Like I just mentioned, there's the DB tools. I'll be using that in part of the demos here, so I suggest you download that and install the xadmin tool from that package, and a few links there for the Rocket MVU GitHub. So our U2 token-based authentication was introduced at Unidata 8.1.1 and Universe 11.3.1. What it does is really fill a void for customers moving to cloud-based identity management systems for user authentication in their application. The traditional username and password method of connecting to a U2 server just becomes less appropriate and sometimes even impossible in that type of environment. It supports no password login to U2 servers where previously an actual OS user ID and password were required by the U2 server to impersonate the user. So here we've got the architecture overview for the token-based authentication. You see it still supports traditional user ID with OS password used to validate the connection with operating system calls. Then the new option is token-based authentication, which just requires a username at token ID format that I'll cover more on in a moment, but no actual user password is passed in. For now, this is just UniRPC services, be like your UO.NET through a UVCS connection. Maybe later on we'll support more like Telnet or SSH, but for now it's just connections coming in through UniRPCD. This slide shows how you build the Auth ID used for the token-based authentication. Basically, it's two parts separated by the @ symbol in the middle, put together to form the Auth ID. The left side contains the username, followed by @ symbol. Right side contains the actual name of the token ID you define. So it's based on application needs, but the Auth ID can be one of the following here. You've got your OS user account only, Mike B, for example. In this case, account impersonation is done like previous versions, so your traditional way. You've got your token ID only, so it'd be no username, just the @token ID, @prod token in this example. So in this case, your user will impersonate the default OS user set in the credential mapping record, which I'll explain more on in a bit. And your full format, where you have your username @token ID, so Mike B @prod token. This way you'd impersonate username given rather than a default username like the example above. And like I mentioned a couple slides back, we still support the traditional method where for a password here where your OS user account password's used. So just your traditional username and password, all managed by the operating system underneath. So the new token-based authentication, you'd actually use your token password there, which is set up in the Credential wallet, set up through the Credman utility. What is a credential mapping record? So a credential mapping record is just a text record to map a token ID to an OS user ID. Each token record should explicitly specify all of its members. This can be individual members or group names, like you see in my example there in the members field. If you specify a group name, then you need to add an asterisk as the first character before the group name. So Unix and Linux, we support Active Directory users and groups or local users. Windows, just due to architecture on Windows, it has to be Active Directory users only. I'll cover more of this in depth in the upcoming demo. I'll create a token definition and you'll see me log in using that token, and I'll cover more of the fields you see in that screenshot. The Credman utility is just an interface to manage credential mapping records. You can see all the options there in the screenshot. It's found in the Universe and Unidata bin directory and does require either someone from the administrators group or root on Unix and Linux to use. Xadmin from our DB tools does actually have a graphical interface to the Credman utility here, so you can use that as an option as well. And to get started with the Credman utility, first initialize your wallet, which is basically the file that'll be containing all of your token ID records. You'll then add your token ID record you want to create to your token definition with a text editor that will open. And finally, you'll save and close that record with your token definition, and you'll be ready to test pretty quickly after that. Some other items of note here. Token-based authentication can definitely leave you more vulnerable to security threats than the traditional OS username and password logon, just simply due to the fact that if your token's compromised, then potentially any or all users on the system could be misrepresented. So we're recommending you run the U2 database behind a firewall or in a DMZ, and you use a secure and isolated environment if possible, along with SSL to secure your communications. And for the demo here, basically I'm going to follow the steps I outlined a couple slides back with the Credman utility. So I'm just going to use that to initialize a wallet and add a token ID, show you how to edit that mapping record. Then we'll test it. I'll explain a little more about it by how you use the token to log in, and I'll also show the Xadmin interface for those that would rather a graphical interface than Credman at command line. Okay, before I go on and actually create a new wallet and a new token definition, I'm going to go ahead and just, I mentioned in the slides before that the wallet is actually stored in this .u2 cred wallet, cred WLT file. This is, I'm working on Windows here on a Universe install. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this file so we're starting clean, but this, again, I'm just showing you where it is and what to do if you need to blow away everything for some reason. Start fresh, which I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And here I've CD'd over to the Universe bin directory. So here's the Credman utility. This is just the help here. So what needs to be done first is actually initialize a wallet. So we'll do credman -init. That's it. Credential wallet's successfully initialized. I now see this brand new file here back in the UV home, so that's a new wallet. I'm not going to add a password on it at this time. That's, it is an option if you want to go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is just show you how to create an actual token definition here. So next step, credman minus add minus ID, and we'll give this token an ID. We'll just do prod token. So what happens is, depending on OS, this is going to open up whatever the default text editor is. Okay, so on Windows, that's Notepad. It opens it up. I don't know, it might be VI or something else on Unix. So this is where you do your editing. It gives a nice description up here in the comments of each field, and down here is where you actually save everything. There's prod token, that's the name we gave it, so the ID is already filled in. Token type 2, always leave it as that. Yeah, that might be something we use in the future if we want to add more functionality to this. Token pass, I'm just going to create something simple. This is the actual token password. So how about that password? OS user ID. You don't have to fill this in, like it says it's optional. But if you choose not to impersonate a specific user with your token, and you just do like @token name, so @prod token in this example as the username you're passing in, then it will default to this one OS user ID. I'm actually going to fill that in as myself. We are working on Windows here, so this is Active Directory users only, and I'm part of Active Directory. Allowed services. Here's the 4 that are allowed: UDCS, UVCS, UD server, UV server. Members. So this is where we go ahead and add individual usernames, or you can go ahead and actually define a group or set a group, which would be prefixed with an asterisk there like it shows. So if I want to do something, I'm going to add myself first of all. Next, I'm going to do the administrators group, and I also, for this demo, have permission from a colleague of mine to go ahead and add his username, and I'm actually going to show we're going to impersonate that with the token even without his OS password, which I'll also go on to explain why the people who have access to this should really be trusted, and not just anybody should be able to access Credman here. Domains, this is a Windows only field. I am just going to go ahead and add this machine we're working on as a dev machine on our development domain. So we'll link those two, and that would mean users on Active Directory for either domain, which should, same in our case here, be allowed as long as they're in the members list here. So that's all I'm going to add here. Next, we can just close this. It'll ask to save. Yes, save it. And if it's all successful, one token added to wallet, changed and saved successfully. So I'll go ahead and just list that real quick. I think this is, yep. So it'll obfuscate the password there. That's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and just show you how to test this. I have I believe this is just a UO.NET little test application another colleague, Paul Chang, wrote, and it's great for just testing connections. So I have this host name where we've set up the token, and we're just going to connect through UVCS to the HS sales account. I'll show you first. This is the traditional username and password. So that's still supported, obviously, if you want to do that. Next, we'll do it through token-based authentication. I think that's what I named it, right? Prod token. So you do username at prod token. There are some cases where you might need to do, if I spell it right, domain name in front of the username as well. Kind of depends on your Active Directory setup. Password, I'll be actually adding the token password here, not my OS level password that I just showed you I could log in with. And I'll actually prove that in a second. So it's just the word password that we saved for the token password. So let's try it. And we've been connected. And there I am. So next, I'll show you without changing anything. We'll just, this way, according to what I said earlier, it should impersonate that default user ID we set in there, which was my own username still. I'm not going to change the password. Password for the token is still the same. And it connects. Let's see who I am. And Belmy, just as it should be. And to show you this works as someone else on Active Directory, I have my colleague's permission to do this. I obviously don't have his password. This is just the token password. And we're now a Clay. So that's why it is really important to keep this secure and only accessible to those who really need to be administrators for the credential manager. You can really impersonate anybody if that password's compromised. So how this would work, usually with your application to make it essentially a no password login, is once that user logs into Windows or whatever their client machine is where you have the application, their username's going to be read from who's logged in at the OS level on that machine, and I think you'd have some sort of code that would then pass that in front of, like, somewhere where they don't actually see this at all. So you obviously don't want the user to have the token password. So that would be, I don't know, hard-coded or passed in from somewhere else behind the scenes in the application. You just gather a username, put that in front of the @token ID, and pass it with the token password rather than their OS level password, since you don't want that being passed around. That's essentially how it would be set up at a customer site for just token-based login with no OS password. And final item here, I'm just going to show you real quick what this looks like from the Xadmin tool. I've already got it open. I've got the Universe server added that we were just working with. I haven't touched any of the Credential wallet stuff. I'm leaving it as is. Ignore that message. So we're going to go, once connected, in the admin tasks, so Credential Manager. Can close that one. And so basically just kind of looks like a graphical view of what we added through Credman in Notepad on the other Windows system. Yep, same idea. You can add a wallet password, machine tag. If I wanted to update this one, essentially looks the same, just a nice graphical view is all. Can add another, delete them, pretty much everything you do from Credman, just in a nicer view here.